So once we familiarize ourselves with the interface, now it's actually time to start drawing in Autocad. Now Autocad is a very, very advanced and complex programs with hundreds of commands. So it actually takes a few years to really, understand all the commands and all that it can do. Because of that, Autocad is not a program that's limited, but it actually is one of those programs where it does so many things. So it's not really a matter of if Autocad can do it, it's a matter of just figuring out how Autocad can do it. So again, it's very complex. There's not a whole heck of a lot that it can't do. So keep that in mind when starting to work with it. Now, even though we might not cover all of the commands, if you can think it up, Autocad can do it. What is also particularly helpful is that Autocad, with each tool, as we saw in the earlier demonstration, if we mouse over that, it has a little explanation of what that tool does, and so it's extremely helpful in starting with the program. Now, starting with 2012, one of the things is when you start to type a command, Autocad will now start to fill it in because there's so many of them. And so what you can do is you can start by typing the command and it'll fill in the rest. So it makes it a little bit easier to try to figure out what the command is that you're looking for, or to find it quickly. If you don't know your command, okay, that is a way for you to, essentially guess and try to see if Autocad has it, or to kind of spark your memory a little bit and find it. Now, the structure of Autocad allows for several methods for entering commands. Now, the thing about Autocad is that it's really redundant. Okay, so there's about 3 ways of doing anything in Autocad, including entering a command. So the one way of entering a command is by actually going up to the ribbons and by clicking on the button and activating the command that way. Now what you'll see is that when I mouse over any of these, okay, you'll see at the bottom where it says line, press F1 for more help. That line is actually the command for that tool. So what you can also do is you can type in line, okay, and hit enter. Okay, that activates the command, so I'm just going to hit escape to get out of that. Or what I can do is I can actually type in what's called an alias, and it's essentially a shortcut for the commands. And so line is L and enter. Okay, and you'll see that when you start to type in the command, okay, it'll come up with a list of commands that I mentioned earlier, starting in 2012. Now you'll see that when I start to type in my commands, okay, you'll see that my command line is essentially moved up by my cursor, and that's because if I go down here, my dynamic input is on. Okay, so that's what that button is for, is that if I prefer it to show up there, I can actually set my command line to be up near my cursor. If not, then what I can do is if I turn this off, okay, and I start typing line, you'll see that now it goes down to my command line. Okay, so again, it's one of those things where you kind of get used to which one you like better, and you go with it from there. A lot of times what happens is people will, turn on their dynamic input. That's actually the way that I prefer to work, and they'll close their command line. Okay, again, it's just, a matter of preference. Now, if I start to, I'm just going to turn off my dynamic input for this command, but if I type in line and hit enter, okay, you'll see that Autocad is talking back to me. So it either does it there, or if I hit escape to get out of that command, if I turn on my dynamic input and I type in line and hit enter, you'll see that it also asks me to specify my first point. So what Autocad is doing as it goes is it's basically keeping track of the input that it needs, and that's again why it's really helpful in that it tells you what it needs. Okay, so Autocad just doesn't sit there and let you figure it out. It basically continues this two-way dialogue, asking the input that it needs and kind of prodding you along to start to supply it. So again, to get out of this command, I'm going to hit escape, okay, and you know that I'm reset, or back to square one with the commands when my command line is asking me to type a command and when my cursor actually has the square in the middle. Okay, it's recommended to learn the most frequent commands. Okay, you'll actually learn them as you go. They'll be like second nature to you. But to start off with, we will, be focusing on, not only tool buttons, okay, but also the commands, typing them in and the aliases at the same time. So as I said, working in Autocad is really, really redundant, okay, not only with the way that we enter our tools, but also the way that we enter too as well. So the sequence for entering commands is always to either click on the tool button, okay, you can type in the command or you can type in the alias as we just did, and then you hit enter. And so with that redundancy, okay, there's also 3 ways that we can enter, okay. If I type in line and hit enter, that's one way of hitting enter. I'm going to hit escape, okay, escape always takes me out of the command. I can hit L and spacebar, okay, so spacebar is also enter, and I'm going to hit escape to get out of that. And then if I type in line or L again, or, again, I can go up to my tool button and I can click on that for the command. And if I right click, okay, this will automatically go into the enter. But if I type in line and right click is also a way of entering in AutoCAD. So you have those 3 ways. You can either hit enter, you can hit spacebar, or you could click on your right click. And again, that's another preference thing. So it's up to you which one you feel most comfortable with. Now, because the spacebar is actually a way of entering, it starts to not really goof things up, but things are a little bit different when we start to enter commands that might have multiple words to them, or when we start to enter the dimensions that we want, okay? So navigating model space. The next step, to getting know our way around the program is to understand how to navigate within the model space. So given the fact that everything we draw is at full scale, so in model space, everything is going to be at full scale, the model space is essentially infinite. So what we do in order to move around this, because we can either have a small project or we can have a much larger project, the ways that we move around it is by panning and zooming, which can be done with the mouse too as well. So if I hold down the mouse, okay, you'll find that my scroll button turns into a pan hand, okay. You can also type in P for pan, or you can type in, as you see, pan there, and that'll do the same thing, but using your mouse is the easiest way of doing it. So all I have to do is hold down my mouse and the scroll button on my mouse and move my mouse, and you'll see what that does is it pans my model space. It doesn't move anything physically, so if I have objects, okay, and in AutoCAD, anything that is a shape, anything that is a, whether it's a line, a rectangle, a circle, they're all referred to as objects. I'm not moving anything physically, I'm not moving any objects physically, all I'm doing is moving around what I'm seeing in model space. What I can also do is I can scroll up, okay, to zoom in, and I can scroll down to zoom out. So, it's pretty easy, to use with your mouse. If you double click on your mouse, on the scroll button on your mouse, what that does is it actually zooms to the extents of the drawing. So that is also another very helpful thing to, have it in terms of your mouse too as well. So since it'll be required that we produce drawings that are to a scale, what we need to do is we need to start to enter precise values into the program. So at this moment, there's a little bit of a general background. The concept of drawing in AutoCAD, as we notice, is that we're drawing everything at full scale. Okay, so that's 1-to-1. Unlike when drawing by hand, where you have to calculate the length of a particular line at a certain scale, in advance. What we're doing now is we're actually drawing everything as it is, as it would be in real life, okay? And then the scaling happens when we actually bring our drawings in and we work with paper space, okay? So this first step of the program is to set up our units accordingly, okay? So in order to do that, what we want to do before we start to draw anything is we want to start by setting up our units, and that is the command units. And what this does is it turns the default, okay, of decimal units, which you can see in the lower left-hand corner when we see our polar coordinates, you can see that they're in decimal format. Now what we want to do is we want to change those to architectural. Okay, so by typing in units, this brings us to the window to change that length. So under length and type, I want to change it from decimal to architectural. And then really everything else is fine. The precision of 16th is fine. The inches is fine. The decimal degrees is fine. And then we want to hit OK. If you find that for some reason, now this should change to feet and inches in the corner. If you find that it's not changing like that, okay, we'll get into templates next week, but make sure to contact me at least for this week so that you can figure out, how to get started correctly. But if you see the feet and inches down here, okay, now you know that you're, starting off on the right foot. So what we want to do before we do anything is we want to change those units to architectural. And so now with the next lesson, we can actually start to work with the tools that we have in order to start drawing.